Welcome back to another review of Eerie, Indiana. In case you're new, I've been doing a review on every single episode of Eerie, Indiana, which was one of my favorite TV shows as a kid growing up in the 90s. This video, I'll be reviewing episode 4, The Losers, so let's get into it. This episode originally aired on October 6, 1991, and was directed again by Joe Dante of Gremlins. This episode starts off with Marshall writing in his journal about how things have been disappearing in Eerie. He begins to tell us how his dad seems to be getting hit the hardest with missing things. Marshall's dad just thinks he's getting hit with a rush of bad luck, and he puts his briefcase in the fridge. Marshall's dad's focus is on his work. He's given a presentation on a new petroleum-based extract banana water flavor for the water. It's all in his briefcase that Marshall pulled out of the fridge, but when Marshall's dad realizes he needs his briefcase, it's gone missing already. Marshall's dad is frantically looking for his briefcase in the house. Marshall's mom tells him to relax and they will find the briefcase, but Marshall's dad makes the mistake of saying he could care less about the briefcase, which was a gift from Marshall's mom, because it's what's inside that he's more worried about. This causes Marshall's parents to start arguing over the briefcase, with Marshall's dad saying if he doesn't find it, he will lose his job. It's up to Marshall to find it. It then cuts to Marshall and Simon working on a model, with Marshall explaining the situation to Simon. Marshall thinks his dad might have the old people's disease. He's pushing 35, you know. That's some pretty funny writing for a kid's show. Anyway, Marshall tells Simon they need to come up with a great plan to save his dad's job and possibly his marriage. Marshall tells Simon to hand him the last piece for their model, but as you would have guessed, it's missing too. Simon then by mistake says something that gives Marshall an idea. Simon says the problem is that things go missing when you're not watching, but if you're watching, it wouldn't get lost. Marshall then tries to test this theory with an experiment or a trap with a dollar bill attached to a fishing pole, hoping they could see where it goes if it gets lost. Just then they get a bite. It leads them to Erie's most notorious biker gang called the Unkind Ones. The biker asks Marshall if the dollar bill belongs to him, and things start to look a little scary for Marshall. But then the biker politely tells him to be more careful and hands him the dollar bill back, and they ride off, looking for a lost puppy. So as a second experiment, they decide to use luggage and set up a trap at the bus stop with Marshall in the luggage and Simon watching them from a distance. Just then a bus blocks Simon's view and can no longer see Marshall. When the bus leaves, Marshall is gone. Just then Simon notices a guy in an orange jumpsuit wheeling the luggage away. His name is Al, and he is played by Dick Miller, who's done a ton of things. You might know him from The Burbs, Small Soldiers, Terminator, Gremlins. It was a director trademark of Joe Dante to frequently cast Dick Miller. Sadly, Dick Miller passed away in 2019. Anyway, so Al goes into the alley and stores the trunk with Marshall into a secret compartment. Simon just missed it. Al tells him there's no luggage around, and if he doesn't believe him, he can take a look around himself. It seems that Marshall has disappeared. Then Simon realizes Al stole his walkie-talkie too. It then cuts to Marshall falling down some tube. It finally hits the ground, and Marshall takes a peek and sees some eyes staring back at him. They both scream in fright. The old man lets Marshall out and lets him know he almost gave him a heart attack. This mysterious man is Mr. Lodgepool, who is putting a lost label on a pod from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Same pod as seen in Gremlins, also directed by Joe Dante. Mr. Lodgepool is played by Henry Gibson, who sadly passed away in 2009. He's done a lot of stuff, but I know him mostly from The Burbs. Anyway, Mr. Lodgepool lets Marshall know he's in the Bureau of Lost. Fun fact, as Marshall and Mr. Lodgepool are walking up the stairs of the Bureau of Lost, you can see a man's arm in the top right hand side of the screen. Mr. Lodgepool doesn't say much after that, and goes and takes a phone call from the head office. He lets them know that they have taken all the supplies they needed, and that everything is on track. The head office tells them they need a satellite to go missing. Marshall tries to introduce himself, but Lodgepool doesn't care. Mr. Lodgepool is trying to contact Al on the surface. He gets a hold of him and tells him he sent him a code 5, referring to Marshall. He also tells him the new list of things he needs from the head office, including pacemaker batteries, which even Al thinks is low, but Lodgepool quickly tells him there's no room for pity in this business. Al then leaves, taking a few items along the way. Marshall then asks Mr. Lodgepool if he can help him find his dad's briefcase, in which Mr. Lodgepool just laughs at him. He lets Marshall know that he won't help him. Marshall again tries to talk to Mr. Lodgepool and questions why they do what they do. Mr. Lodgepool tells him he's helping the economy. that he's a special certified misappropriation engineer. Marshall asks how he's helping the economy, and Mr. Lodgepole goes on a rant telling him why. Marshall tells him the reason he's there is to find his dad's briefcase, which has that valuable banana goop in it, and that he could lose his job over it. Mr. Lodgepole thinks about it for a second, but agrees to at least see if it's there. He goes through his records and confirms it is in fact there and lost. Marshall asks for the briefcase, since it's right there in his face, but Mr. Lodgepole refuses. Marshall tries to reason with him. Just then, Al comes in through the TV and lets Lodgepole know that there's a kid trying to lure him with a pen. The kid in fact turns out to be Simon, which makes Marshall very hopeful. Al tells him all the things he's gotten so far, and Lodgepole tells him to avoid Simon. He then proceeds to take monster claws from other model kits. Marshall tries to make a deal with Mr. Lodgepole, saying if he gives him his dad's briefcase, he'll send him a bunch of things he needs to be lost. Mr. Lodgepole refuses and says he can't let Marshall go back, saying if people knew about this secret business, there would be chaos and tons of people looking for their lost things. Mr. Lodgepole suggests the only way to fix things is to declare Marshall as misplaced. We then cut to Al, who came out of the dryer of the laundromat, taking a few things while he leaves, but Simon's been watching him and noticed he came out of the dryer. It then cuts to Mr. Lodgepole leaving Marshall alone for a minute, then cuts back to Simon making the connection of lost socks and the dryer. Marshall is seen sitting on the stairs with no luck of finding an escape. Just then, a tube comes down and out comes Simon, full of lost laundry. Marshall and Simon have a quick reunion, and Simon tells Marshall that the tube leads back to the dryers at the Eerie laundromat. They hold on to the tube before it goes back, while Marshall grabs Mr. Lodgepole's stamp for proof. They head back into the tube and escape back to the Eerie laundromat. Marshall and Simon are back in Marshall's attic talking about the lost depot underground in Indiana, when his mom lets him know that he has a special delivery. Marshall sees who it is, and it's Mr. Lodgepole in a mailman uniform with a package. Mr. Lodgepole asks Marshall for his rubber stamp back in exchange for his dad's briefcase. Marshall refuses at first, so Mr. Lodgepole knows what it's like to lose something himself. They decide to make the swap. Just then they notice that Marshall's mom just bought a new briefcase for Edgar. Then Edgar tells her that the Banana Goop project was a bust anyway. Upon hearing that, Mr. Lodgepole takes back the briefcase, which makes Marshall mad because they had a deal. Then Mr. Lodgepole returns Marshall's monster claw back and lets him know that he's never returned to anything before. Marshall thanks him and asks how it feels, which makes Mr. Lodgepole say disgusted, and because of Marshall he's been demoted. Lodgepole then walks away ranting to himself. Marshall notes that his parents didn't need the briefcase or for him to get lost to save their marriage. They had that between them the whole time, and that was something even Al couldn't lose. Marshall then puts the monster claw into the evidence locker. It then cuts to Lodgepole stealing a tire and reporting to his new boss, which happens to be Al. Al is now in control and tells Lodgepole to check out the chicken drainage pipe. Well, that concludes episode 4 of Eerie, Indiana, The Losers, another classic. I enjoy these Joe Dante episodes. It's filled with these great directed scenes and cast, which is amazing. The story was clever and well thought out. I think it still holds up to this day. But let me know yourself, what did you think of this episode? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.